The Marvel Cinematic Universe has captivated audiences with its humor, heart, and astounding consistency between movies. These aren't just action movies with pretty people punching things. There's an internal logic to Marvel's movieverse carefully laid out over years of storytelling, except sometimes there isn't. Today on The Binger, we're going to look at the times Marvel movies just don't make sense. At various points in Captain Marvel, Carol is able to refashion human tech to interact with KREE devices. She even manages to get random junk from Radio Shack to function as an intergalactic communication device. And this is all in the 90s, mind you. Meanwhile, in 2019, I'm having problems making my keyboard work on a Mac computer because it was made for a Windows machine. So apparently, KREE tech is impossibly universal. Like, it's even better than USB. Meanwhile, another scene shows Monica, Carol's best friend's daughter, playing with her suit. She uses a shader of some kind to pick out colors for Carol's new uniform. So why does a military-issue uniform come with such lovely customization options? Is Carol a character in some kind of MMO? And how does Monica just immediately understand how to operate KREE tech? Again, that stuff is apparently insanely universal. Maybe humanity should just let the KREE conquer us, that way we could have that tech. Maybe then I could have a functioning keyboard. Towards the end of Captain Marvel, we get a nice visual of Carol blasting off while wearing her old jacket. It's meant to be an inspiring, feel-good moment. Carol is her old self again, connecting to her past but embracing the full power of her current self. The problem is, it makes no sense. Carol's suit is made of some kind of super KREE material. We've already established that it has KREE tech that is amazingly intuitive and even includes color-changing options. So it's not too much of a stretch to assume that it's also extremely durable. We can buy that it can stand up to the rigors of space travel and combat. But a simple bomber jacket? That's just plain old Earth weather. How does it survive leaving and entering the atmosphere of planets on a regular basis? Wouldn't it just burn up right away? And then again, maybe that's exactly what happens. We don't see the jacket again in Endgame. Maybe the moment Carol blasts off at the end of Captain Marvel, her beloved jacket catches fire and is incinerated, and she just never speaks of it again. Let's stop trashing Captain Marvel now. Let's move on to another mighty hero, one who also has magic clothes. We're talking about Thor, of course, who has the ability to magically summon outfits for himself several times now. We see him do this most recently in Avengers Endgame, right before the final battle with Thanos. Thor is still in his depressed, schlubby state. Then he summons the lightning and transforms into his armored, godly self, which is fine. Let's just accept that part of being a god is having the power to instantly assume a magnificent form. Our problem is with the weirdly specific rules of this power. For some reason, Thor can braid his hair, but he can't regain his abs. What kind of godly power goes as far as magic braids but stops before magic muscles? You're telling us that Thor, the god of thunder and king of Asgard, can't zap off a few pounds? This one is so obvious that we can't not bring it up. What's the deal with Hulk in Avengers Endgame? In Infinity War, we're introduced to the idea that Bruce Banner and Hulk are at an impasse. After taking a beating from Thanos, Hulk doesn't feel like coming out to fight humanity's battles anymore. Some viewers suggested that the Hulk was frightened after finding an opponent that he couldn't beat. Others suggested that he was just fed up with being the Avengers' unappreciated trump card. This was actually a nice payoff to Hulk's role in other movies. Banner often expressed regret over the Hulk and the damage that he caused. Hulk was angry at the way Thor and the others treated him like a child. So how do these two sides compromise and share one body? They just do. That's the answer we get in Endgame. Somehow they just agreed to have Banner's brain in Hulk's body. Why does Hulk suddenly agree to give up his personality? And is Banner really okay with being a jolly green giant all the time? Professor Hulk made for a lot of funny moments, but it still makes no sense given what we know about the character. Maybe Phase 4 will give us more explanation, but we're not hopeful. The Infinity Stones are the most powerful artifacts in the universe. Each one commands an aspect of reality itself. You'd think it would take some time to unlock their secrets, but Thanos uses them with a snap of his fingers. Literally. We see in Doctor Strange that using the Time Stone requires some study. Not a lot, but it's implied that it has the abilities to go beyond rewinding and fast-forwarding an apple. If Strange were given more time, he might have been able to draw out its full power. Thanos, meanwhile, just knows how to use each stone moments after getting it. Not just that, but he comes up with the idea for a gauntlet that can use all of the stones at once. He does that before even getting more than one stone. Is it just us, or is Thanos a remarkably fast learner? It seems like wiping out exactly half the universe with one snap would be an extremely precise act. Are the stones sentient? Does Thanos just wish and snap and then they do the rest? If so, Aladdin's genie could really learn a thing or two from these Infinity Stones. There's no gray area in these wishes. Remember back during the lead up to Infinity War, when we were guessing which Avenger would sacrifice themselves or be lost to the Mad Titan? Little did we know that we would be losing a lot more than an Avenger or two, or that we would gain them all back at the cost of Iron Man. But watching Infinity War for the first time was an edge of your seat experience. Each time Thanos landed a powerful hit, we gasped and wondered if this would be the end of a certain hero. One moment in particular was terrifying. The part where Thanos turned Iron Man's blade back on him and stabbed him. That seemed like it could be the end for Tony Stark, and it should have been, were it not for the nanomachine technology that Tony had developed. We later see that a nano foam would quickly plug up the wound and prevent him from bleeding out. Our question is, why doesn't everyone have access to this nano foam? How many stabbings or shootings in the MCU could have been prevented if Tony would have just shared this technology? The language of Groot makes no sense. While we just sort of accept that Groot is basically a Pokemon, the writers still give him a lot of credit when it comes to expressiveness. Whereas Pokemon can only really indicate basic things with their tone and gestures, Groot can apparently tell whole stories and discuss complex ideas. We see him repeat the instructions for Rocket's homemade bomb in one well-known scene. This involves how to push certain buttons, in what order, and what the end result will be. Yet how does he convey all of this with the simple phrase, "I am Groot"? That's a lot of meaning to attach to one sentence, no matter how it's said. And yet the scripts treat it like it's a whole language. Thor even says Asgard had classes that taught Groot. It's a cute idea at first, but it's also a huge breach of logic. A single sentence can only be said in so many ways. It might be more expressive than you think at first, but it could never be a whole language. And it definitely wouldn't be something that you could just pick up the way the Guardians do. After Thor reveals his prowess in the Groot language, we see him share a moment with Rocket. The two discuss the threat of Thanos and what they have to lose. Then Rocket cements their new friendship by giving Thor a robotic eye. It proves to be a pretty touching moment, showing how much Rocket has learned about friendship after Guardians of the Galaxy 2. It also raises some questions about Thor's Asgardian physique. Thor just pops the eye in, and after a good whack, he can see as if nothing happened. We might have been able to accept this combination of Thor's constitution and space tech were it not for what Rocket says next. He tells Thor that he should have washed the eye first. So, was that a joke? Or can Thor get an eye infection? At first you'd think that it had to be a joke because Thor's a god. He should have some kind of advanced healing abilities that protects him from meager infections. Except we now know that he can gain weight like any old human if he eats too much. So, which is it? Is Thor mightier than humans, or is he just basically a sparkle-fingered human with a cool accent? When it comes down to it, a lot of the problems with Marvel movies come down to science, or fake science. That's what happens when you try to take the bizarre happenings of comic books and explain them with made-up terms. Ant-Man is probably the worst offender of this. He even says it himself, joking about how they just stick the word quantum on things to make it sound smart. But you don't even need to get into the quantum realm to explain how Ant-Man makes no sense. That and time travel are a whole video unto themselves. All we need to do is look at the ants. Ants are actually very intelligent creatures. They tend to give themselves over to a hive mentality, but they're much more than drones. So if an ant suddenly found itself enlarged, it might have some ideas. But we never see this in the movies. When Scott is replaced by a giant ant during Ant-Man and the Wasp, it just sits there playing drums. This does make some sense as it was instructed to follow Scott's daily routine. But after the snap, Ant-Man and the Wasp's after credits scene depicts the same ant still playing drums after Thanos wipes away the Pym family. In reality, the ant would probably break out at some point to find food. Then again, maybe it was smart enough and learned how to work Grubhub. Also in Ant-Man and the Wasp is Hank Pym's shrunken building. It's a cool idea to be sure, but actually very impractical. For one, you'd have to find an empty patch of land large enough to accommodate an entire multi-story office building every time you moved. After that, you'd need to attach electricity and plumbing every time you moved. They do explain it somewhat with giant Duracell batteries that power the place, but what about the plumbing? Where do all the humans and the ants do their, business? Finally, is all of the furniture and equipment bolted down? Because they run around and toss the mini building around quite a bit. That seems like a terrible idea with all the expensive machines it holds inside. But what do we know? We're just a YouTube channel, not a group of crime-fighting ant scientists. One nice little piece of connective tissue between the Marvel movies and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is the KREE. The blue aliens are warmongers that often threaten Earth, and yet the heroes always find a way to send them packing. But not before taking some of their tech, and other things. Carol Danvers became Captain Marvel when she absorbed cosmic energy from a KREE engine. Well, technically she became Veers, member of the KREE Star Force. This effectively made her a KREE, and she was even given a transfusion of their blue blood. This strengthened her physical capabilities to those of a superhuman. A similar thing happened in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. to Phil Coulson and Daisy Johnson. However, Coulson and Daisy went through a more believable transformation. As believable as you can get with an alien blood transfusion anyway. They had to take some time to adjust before eventually gaining slightly enhanced strength. But for the most part, they're still normal red-blooded humans. Captain Marvel, on the other hand, just bleeds blue now. For that to happen, she would have to completely lose all the red. Not to mention get new blood cells. Even someone as strong as her wouldn't have survived that. What parts of Marvel movies do you think make no sense? Did we miss anything totally obvious? Let us know in the comment section down below, and subscribe to The Binger to hear us tell you why your favorite movies make no sense.